it's also been empowering to kind of like um, be in control of my own life. I mean, I think that, that stability and security um, is great, but it's easy to get a little too comfortable in a way. Like every year you have a little more seniority and you get a better schedule and you get an extra vacation day and a little more money. And like every year you stay, it's harder and harder to leave.
Mm-hmm. Welcome to the End the Silence podcast. I'm your host, Sandra Payne. As an RN and holistic wellness coach working with nurses, I am uniquely positioned to hear the struggles, the deep passions, and the stories of nurses, our silent heroes. Many nurses suffer with burnout, depression, anxiety, PTSD, substance abuse, and suicidality, and they do so in silence. Nurses are the ones we turn to for help when we need it the most, and this is a heavy burden for them to carry. This burden, the pervasive bullying and unsupportive culture of our healthcare system, means many nurses have lost their voice. These are their stories. Welcome back to the End the Silence podcast. My name is Sandra Payne. I am your host, and I'm here tonight with Jasper Pare, if I said that right. He is a registered nurse from Victoria, BC, and I'm so eager to dive into his story and all he has to share with us. Also, I just want to celebrate that Jasper is the first male nurse to join me on the show, so yay!
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Yeah,
Cool.
totally. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, great.
Awesome.
Happy to be here. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
honored that you wanted to talk to me. So this is great. I'm
I'm so
excited.
excited. Yeah, me too. So let's kick it off with a nursing in real life moment.
So I work in the operating room in a hospital in Victoria, BC, and something that happened to me recently. I think I was on, yeah, it would have been an evening shift, and we had an emergency cardiac case come in. So the hospital I work at is the cardiac center for all of Vancouver Island. And I'm not a cardiac trained nurse. I've had a few kind of like limited experiences with it, but typically it takes like months of training before you're scrubbing on this kind of cases independently. And we had a case crash through the door, um, and our on-call heart nurse wasn't able to make it in time. They were on their way, but we just had to like get started anyway. So I was kind of the one who decided to step up and try it. Like no one on staff had the skills necessary, and even the cardiac assist, which is usually like a GP or like a doctor, like they weren't there either. So I kind of jumped in and was setting up the table. Patient crashed through the room. They were like prepped, and um, we're just like we're going for it. I don't have all the supplies. I don't know what I'm doing, but we just had to keep going, and we didn't. The craziest thing was that like the sternal saw, no one knew how to set up properly, but we just couldn't wait. It normally has this like this guard, so you can only cut like a certain amount, and so we're just diving in, and we just had to like cut open the sternum without this guard, and the saw is kind of like going all over the place, and we get the patient's chest cracked, and it's just like yeah, it's nuts because there was a rent in the patient's heart wall, and but anyway, we got control, and eventually the cardiac assist and a properly trained cardiac nurse came in and took over. But yeah, I just that's something I love about the operating room is just like you never know what's gonna come through the door, and you're always learning, and you just kind of like you just take it one step at a time, and just take a deep breath and keep going. So yeah, that was kind of a memorable moment for me that's happened recently.
Totally. And I feel like
Yeah,
it's like an example of actually what nursing is. You never know what you never know what you're walking into. You never know what's coming in the door or what you're, if you're in a a unit, you never know what you're walking into on that day. And
Hmm.
that's kind of like the uncertainty that nurses faced every single day, right? Every single shift is uncertain. You really have no idea. Being able to face that kind of uncertainty and rise to it in every situation, I think really is a great example of the resiliency and the grit that nurses hold just naturally because of the situations that we're in. So thank you for sharing that story. I can just like, even as you were telling it, I was like kind of gripping my knees, like, where is this going?
Yeah.
So thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah. And so let's kind of reel it back a little bit, and maybe you can share with us a little bit more about your story as a nurse, and maybe some of your successes, some of your struggles, and yeah, I'll just give you the floor, and you can share with us whatever feels right.
Sure. Great. Thanks, Sandra.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I have been a nurse since 2013. I went through the like Camosun UVic program in Victoria, and kind of like very early on, I think in second year, I did an OR follow through. Actually, it was cardiac surgery that I saw in like second year, so this would have been over 10 years ago. And just seeing like the team environment and the technology and just how exciting and interesting it all was. I was drawn to that right away, and so that's kind of like where my career path took me, is right into the operating room after graduation. And yeah, I've really enjoyed it. It's been a satisfying and rewarding career. I think my most like rewarding moments have had to do with teaching and preceptoring. I've always really enjoyed preceptoring. And I've preceptored a few students over the last few years. And yeah, it's so cool to watch a student come in and just, you get to kind of like live through their eyes. Like, because I remember when I did my first aura follow through, just like how exciting, and like it was just like momentous and memorable occasion for me. And then it starts to become kind of routine after a while. So it's really cool to be able to like excuse me, relive that excitement over and over again. And then watch them kind of take their first steps into like doing their first scrub on their own, and then see them around on the unit years later, and see them continuing to grow and grow into these like, independent and confident nurses.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so I've had a really satisfying career in nursing. And then on, let's see, no, October 26th, I guess it was, I was put on unpaid leave for choosing not to share confidential information about my medical status.
Mm-hmm.
And middle of November, I was terminated. So I'm actually, uh, I'm still a nurse, I guess. I know I'm still a nurse, but I'm not an employed nurse anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where my career in nursing has temporarily, at least, ended.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I'm doing something totally different, um, and crossing my fingers that I'll get back into patient care in the future.
Yeah. And so I definitely want to come back to that. To that whole experience and how that's impacted you. And but before that, I'm curious. I talk to a lot of women
Mhm.
nurses, and of course it's predominantly women in nursing, but
Mhm.
I have a really pretty well-rounded grasp on the challenges that nurses face, and I've heard so many stories from women's perspective, and I'm super curious to see if there's any difference,
Mhm.
from your perspective. But what have been the struggles as a nurse, like, so
Mhm.
everything prior to like the last 6 months kind of deal, but
Mhm.
what have been like, how has it affected you being a nurse? Like, what have been some of the struggles you've had?
I don't feel like I've had a lot of struggles. I've definitely found it challenging. I found the shift work very challenging. Um, and I think I struggled earlier on in my career with work-life balance. Um, and yeah, I mean, I know that burnout in nursing is um, such a prevalent thing in this field. But yeah, I don't feel like I've struggled with burnout. I think I've always been good at setting kind of boundaries
Mm-hmm.
around like overtime and things like that. Because I know for a lot of people it's really hard to say no because if you don't show up, it's like maybe there's no one else, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think that's one of the reasons it's so bad in nursing is because like you can't
Because you care.
yeah, because you care totally. Yeah. And not that I don't care, but
No, of
I
course.
think I mean the OR is a little different, right? Because if there's not two free nurses, we can't run a room. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like we just say no, we can't do that surgery. And it sucks because it means someone gets canceled and they maybe have to come back on another day. And for patients, it's a huge day for them. They're going through a life-changing experience.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's something positive, sometimes something negative. So for them to kind of like miss out on their surgery and have to reschedule their lives is um, it sucks. But I also feel like we're kind of like propping up the healthcare system by continually saying yes, and then we have nurses working double shifts every day and just getting more and more burnt out, and then eventually you know leaving their jobs. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I wonder about like, I think a lot of, well, first of all, the aspect of like the guilt and the not wanting to leave your colleagues. As much as it's like we care and we don't want to do that, it's this imbalance between caring for others and caring for ourselves, right? So,
Totally,
and
totally. Yeah.
that's where I see a lot of the struggle. And when it comes to women, there is, in my experience personally, but also in just the work I do, is like there's this bar, this expectation that we feel, or maybe we've been taught and conditioned, quite likely, to feel like we have to meet. And then if we're not meeting it, then we feel like a failure. We feel like we're not good enough, or we're weak, or we're not cut out for this
Mm,
job.
mm,
And so then there's this constant pushing, even at the sacrifice of ourselves, in order to meet this sort of like ever rising bar that we like. It's unachievable because it's this, it's really deep rooted and connected to so many different pieces. But I'm curious, like, as you're sharing and saying like there wasn't really a lot of struggles in that way for you,
mm.
did you feel like that same kind of expectation coming into nursing? Like, did you have that same kind of like idol that you felt like you had to live up to as a nurse?
Mm. Yeah, that's an interesting question. Yeah, I mean, definitely. Like, I will say, I guess, because I was talking about burnout and being overworked and stuff. Um, I've noticed that more in the women on our unit
Mm.
than the men. So maybe there is something there for sure. Um, yeah, I mean, I didn't go into it with too many expectations of myself. I mean, I always just came in wanting to do the best job I could. But I didn't have, yeah, I don't think I had like um, a super strong expectation of
Mm-hmm.
myself in that way that you're describing.
Yeah, it's really
Um,
it's really quite interesting.
yeah.
I'm like I want to probe this deeper, just because I feel like there's something there.
Mhm.
And just in primarily, and it's making me feel like, oh my gosh, I need to talk to more men, to see if this is like a common thread, or
Yeah.
Because I remember myself coming into nursing. I definitely was like, excited, and I was ambitious, and I was,
Hmm.
feeling confident but nervous at the same time, and excited to learn, like all those pieces. But it felt also like, you see all these nurses that are there, and they just give everything that they got, and there's like, okay, that's how I have to be, like. And so then
Hmm.
when reality starts to set in, and you're being called in on, every day off, and you're being
Hmm.
asked to miss your breaks, and you're being asked to stay later, and you're being asked to do all these things, I think it's a really slippery slope towards, even if you start out with like feeling, confident that you're gonna be able to make this all work, it's a slippery slope of how quickly you can start to leave yourself behind and not care for your own needs and just be all into your work. I think particularly too, when I started, I didn't have a family, I didn't have any other responsibilities really. I had a dog, but it was not like there was a lot of things holding me back, so I was always working. But then as life changes, those like precedents are set, and then it becomes really hard to kind of scale that back. um
Hmm.
I don't know if you have
Yeah.
anything to add to that.
Yeah, totally. I think we all go into the profession with the best of intentions. Like I think fundamentally anybody who goes into nursing is, is a caring person, and typically, a selfless person as well, right? Um, yeah. So,
Hmm. I think that word is so interesting, selfless. I remember reading, I think it was Glennon Doyle's book, and she talked about selfless. It's like, as women, I'll just share this with you, but a lot of us are kind of trained to be selfless, right? Like to be the
mhm,
giver, to always care for everyone's needs, and
yeah,
selfless is like, it's no self. Like you've taken yourself out of your life. And I think,
right.
of course, that's going to lead to a lot of problems, right? If you're not looking after yourselves. We all know that we need to fill our own cups before we can give to others, but knowing it and actually putting it into action when you're, facing all these kind of deep rooted beliefs about what you're supposed to be like, it's two different things. So let's
Totally.
go let's
Yeah.
go back now to where you were sharing about what's kind of happened for you over the last 6 months, and really back into October,
Mhm,
when the mandates were kind of laid out by the government, and our employers and our I guess our college and our union were supporting it,
mhm,
and leaving us in a position of making that choice. And we were talking just before we hit record, and how that is not an easy choice to land on. And I don't imagine anybody out there who has lost their job was just making that choice just kind of on a whim, and like not giving it any thought and consideration, because it impacts everything. So I'm curious, like, what you don't have to share about like your beliefs or anything like that, if unless you feel you want to, but like what was happening for you? Like what were you seeing that led you to feel like that this was the choice for you?
one thing, I have a colleague in the OR, one of the doctors, who was pretty vocal just about, kind of some of the misinformation that may or may not have been presented by the media and the government, as far as, case numbers and things like that, and just how information can be kind of, um, massaged or presented in a certain way to create fear.
Mhm.
And he was being censored for just trying to offer an alternative to the current narrative. And that made me just kind of like take a pause and really think about things. And that's one of the reasons I initially delayed, um, making a choice regarding the vaccine. And then, the longer I waited, the more clear it seemed to me that it was the right choice, for myself. Um, when the mandates started coming to effect, it just felt wrong on so many levels. And then another reason, kind of earlier on, that I just kind of took a pause on getting it, is because my wife and I were trying to conceive at the time. and there, in my opinion, hadn't been enough time for them to study, and definitively say there's no long-term side effects on certain things like fertility. Um, and yeah, I always found it interesting that they were so quick to kind of promote it in pregnant women, specifically just because typically that's like the last demographic that gets any kind of like medication or vaccine, and there's years of rigorous study. So yeah, there were a few kind of things that kind of made me slow down and think. And yeah, the more I thought about it, the more it felt like the right choice for me. Um, and yeah, like I fundamentally just disagree with the mandates. Um, I believe that we all have, the right to choose what we put in our bodies and make that own kind of like risk benefit analysis for ourselves, definitely. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot more to it than that, but those are a few of the um, the things that came to mind. Excuse me for 1 second.
Yeah.
My dog, he can if he pushes hard enough, he can just open the door into the office. Yeah, he's here now, so he'll stay put.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think it's clear that it was not an easy decision, that you took time to weigh what was right for you.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
then landing in that place, especially seeing a lot of discrepancy, and hearing, from a trusted colleague who is sharing his, what his perception is, and the information that he is trying to share. And what, I would agree. The censorship really early on rubbed me the wrong way, when you would
Mhm.
see people, physicians particularly, renowned physicians with a lot to lose,
Mhm.
speaking out and sharing different information and then being censored. That raised all kinds of red flags for myself as well.
Mhm. Yeah.
And then it's evolved over these last 2 and a bit years, and left us in this really a huge freaking mess that we're in right now. Particularly the mental and emotional impact of all of that, the betrayal that many people
Mhm.
have
Yeah.
felt. And I'm curious, like, how that's impacted you, you know, being terminated from your job that you have worked hard to achieve, and that you have dedicated yourself to, and that was, your, maybe not your life's work. I don't know. It's hard to predict that, but it was,
Yeah.
there was a real sense of pride in the work that you were doing, and a
Mhm.
commitment and a fulfillment to it. And then to have that taken away because of your own personal choice, like, I think it's good for people to hear how that's impacted you.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Sandra. Yeah. I mean, it was really hard. It was really hard, kind of, you know, getting the news. Like that there was a concrete date. I remember. Um, I remember being confident in my decision, but also kind of always hoping in the back of my mind that, like, it was a game of chicken, and I like that they were going to blink eventually. So right up until the last day, I kind of had hope um that they would kind of rescind the mandates, and because it's like our healthcare system was already in crisis before the pandemic, and it's suffered even more during the pandemic, and then now to fire thousands of healthcare workers seems insane.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and then being in the hospital around all these people, who the majority had a negative kind of view of people who had made the choice I had made. So I spent the last few months in my job just kind of like being terrified that someone would have found out about, my stance, because I didn't feel comfortable sharing it in the workplace while I was working. Just because you're kind of surrounded on all sides by people who say nasty things. Um, so yeah, it was hard leading up, and then the impact itself. Yeah, losing my job was tough. I mean, I've always tried to look at challenging situations like this as an opportunity. So, I've taken it as an opportunity to explore a new career, and I'm actually really enjoying that. But it still doesn't make right what's happened to me. I mean, like we were kind of relying on my income, and I've taken a job that's much lower paying, which is fine. Um, but yeah, it's been, like I mentioned, like my wife and I were trying to conceive, and then shortly after I lost my job, we found out she's pregnant, which is amazing. We're so excited. But yeah, I mean, one of the reasons I chose nursing as a career, was for the stability, and then to kind of like, and especially for the stability of having a family, because like my upbringing was great, but it was often unstable financially. So that was something that was really important to me. And we were just deciding to start having a family, is, to be in a stable position, and then to just have that kind of like ripped out from under me all the years of work. Um, yeah, it's been tough, but I generally don't dwell on the negative aspects, because I really believe that that I made the right choice, and ultimately I knew what the consequences were going to be of that choice. I don't agree with them, but I was happy to still um, stick with that gut decision, and carry on with life. And yeah, I believe that I'm on the right path, and that in the end, everything's going to work out. So.
Like I just want to frame that right there. There is, I'll just go back to what you were saying about when you were still working, and the fear that you were feeling, just
Mhm.
around people finding out and what they would say, because I mean, there's division in the whole world, but there is real division in the nursing profession, in the
Mhm.
healthcare system. Really, it's not just in nursing. And there have been some really, really awful, hateful, and shame throwing
Mhm.
things said, and done. And to work in that, already it's a stressful environment when you're working in healthcare. To add that level of fear and insecurity, it just, I can feel that in my body as to what that would have or could have been like for
Mhm.
you.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you knew what the consequences were. Like, it's not like you
Mhm.
made the choice on a whim. It's not like you made it and then were surprised. Like,
Yeah.
there was thought put into it, and it takes a lot of courage, really, to stand for yourself, and to stand for what's right for you. And I really, I'm in awe of everyone who has taken loss, in this, and just for standing for what they believe is right. And
Mhm.
I think of when I got into nursing too, there was this sense of security. Like, I really always felt that no matter what, I was protected. No matter
Mhm.
what, I had this stable career that
Mhm.
I could always, it was stable. It was not a rocky foundation. Like, someday you might lose your job. Someday, there's not enough work. Like, there's always enough
Yeah.
work. And there's always another job if yours is not
Yeah.
working out. Like, there
Yeah.
was there was a real comfort in that. And I think
Mhm. Yeah.
I talked a little bit about this in a separate video, but on my YouTube channel, and I'll link it in the show notes, because it was about an institutional betrayal and how that affects us. And, particularly, I'm feeling like, we're standing on this solid foundation where, like, I got nothing to worry about. Like, I mean, I remember being told, like, you could be an addict and they would still protect you. You still wouldn't lose your
Yeah.
job, right? So I'm like,
Yeah.
that sounds like probably one of the worst places that a nurse could be, is, showing up to work drunk.
Hmm.
But they still would protect you. So here we are
Yeah.
in this place where it's now been shattered. That
Hmm.
foundation, that safe, secure foundation of trust, has been shattered. And now the recovery from that is really the question. Is like, if they invite you back to work, have you considered that, and what that would look like for you? And what do you see as, the rebuild that needs to happen now after shaking and really shattering this foundation?
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Yeah. I mean, my wife and I often kind of like laugh at our situation just because we both had super we thought super secure union jobs where it's like you like you could do you literally would have to like try and get fired, and even then it would be like challenging.
They put you in a
So
program to help you
yeah,
instead
yeah,
of
totally.
firing
So
you.
it's like
Yeah.
it's kind of hilarious that we're in this situation for what I think is fairly innocuous you know choice, totally reasonable choice. And yeah, it sucks because I question if I were to go back, if I were offered, would I go back? And that, it wouldn't be just an automatic yes, right? Like I would take a pause and think about it. And I'm not the only one who feels that way. Like I'm lucky in a way that on my unit there were a few of us who made this decision, and we found out about each other because other employees were gossiping about us. But anyway, yeah, we found each other, and we've actually become really really close with a few of my coworkers who I didn't know as well outside of work, that I now know really well and see regularly, and we've been able to support each other through this process. And I doubt that any of us would just jump to return. Like we all feel betrayed, and we all we've all also looked at this as an opportunity to explore new things. So our union has talked about making us whole, in their kind of like arbitration argument or whatever that means. I mean, back pay and being reinstated with benefits and seniority and all that stuff. It's appealing to me, because we are starting a family,
Mhm.
and I would like that stability if it was offered to me again. But it's also being empowering to kind of like um, be in control of my own life. I mean, I think that that stability and security um, is great, but it's easy to get a little too comfortable in a way. Like every year you have a little more seniority, and you get a better schedule, and you get an extra vacation day and a little more money, and it like every year you stay, it's harder and harder to leave.
Mhm.
For myself anyway. And so I think I had been yearning to do something different for a little while, and but I don't think I would have been able to just leave it, just because.
Mhm.
So in that sense, I'm grateful. I'm doing carpentry now, which is like a big 180, but also not, because I worked actually in orthopedic surgery mostly, which is a lot of like hammers and saws and screws and stuff like that. But yeah, it's really satisfying to be building something and working with my hands and seeing a building kind of like take shape, and know I had a part in it. Although I will say, it's not as rewarding as nursing was. I don't think anything comes close to just like this, the satisfaction you get for caring for someone. So yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we've all missed that as well. It's yeah, it's a sad thing that's happened, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's a very sad thing that's had a devastating impact on a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And a part of what's hard about it too is like seeing um, what feels like, everybody just moving on and kind of forgetting about
Mm-hmm.
those that were harmed and left and thrown out like the garbage, like just,
Yeah.
yeah, and totally dismissed and betrayed. And
Yeah.
that's not how we heal. We can't just forget. That's our freaking culture's history, is like, let's just tuck it under the rug and pretend it didn't happen. Don't look at it because, that's going to be really difficult to recover from. But yet we've never recovered from any historical trauma because we've never faced it. And the only way to heal from this is what I see is accountability.
Mm-hmm.
Accountability and responsibility is stepping up, and these people who have made these decisions um, to own their role and be accountable for what they've
Mm-hmm.
done.
Yeah.
And I don't see any other way of rebuilding trust from this kind of, I'll say it again, this kind of betrayal. But
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting what you were saying about opportunity. I fully am on the same page as you. I think it's important that we honor ourselves and our feelings and our grief. And it is it's so critical actually to us when we are hit, when we are affected in this kind of way, that we truly, I call it, sit in the muck, just to be with the sadness, the grief, the confusion, the anger, all of it, to be with those different feelings and emotions that are going on inside of you, because we can't just bypass that, right? It's a real experience. This is, yeah, there's emotion here. This is hurt. This is
Mm-hmm.
hurt. And
Yeah.
we can't just pretend that isn't real. But then, looking for that different perspective is so important also. Like, we can't just sit in the muck and just wallow in there. It'll devour us, right? So,
Yeah.
you know, sitting in it is really, with this open curiosity and being with what your experience is, but then looking for that shift, looking for that gift, looking for that opportunity. And it sounds like you and some of your colleagues here have really been taking that on. And it's interesting too. I back in October when this all started, I held a meeting, and there was 50 nurses that came who were facing the mandate, and majority of them from BC. And I asked a question in the group, a poll of who in the group was actually really satisfied in their job as a nurse, like excited to go there every single day, feeling like this was it, like I'm in the right spot, right? One
Mm-hmm.
person out of the
Right.
50 said that. So that's 49 of those 50 that were already feeling like, I'm not sure this is right. I'm not sure this is the place for me. Yeah, there is
Mm-hmm.
that comfort. And, it makes me curious if that comfort that they give to us is, maybe a part of how they keep us,
Yeah.
keep
Yeah, I
us
think
kind
it
of
definitely is.
powerless, right? Like,
Yeah.
there was a whole conversation in a previous episode, and we talked about how we give away our power so freely. And then we come to a place where it's like, we don't have a say, right? We don't have a say in our life anymore. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, that was a lot. I kind of tried to tie up there with a bow, but I really am honoring you in your vulnerability to share your story and your heart and how this has affected you. I'm sending you like the most love and excitement, and congratulations for you and your wife.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Yeah.
And this new journey that's about to start. Buckle up. And I have three, so if you need any unsolicited advice, you can always turn my way.
I
I
might take
like to
you up on
say,
that.
like, I'm not a parenting expert, but I've definitely learned some things over the past 11 years. But yes, and I think if there is like a huge takeaway from this is that there, in every difficult situation, there is an opportunity, and it's not always glaring us right in the face. Like, it's not always easy to see right away, and that may just mean that we need to spend more time in our muck. We need to spend more time being with what has happened, and dealing with the grief and all of those feelings that are coming up, but then looking for it, right? Like, asking those questions of, like, why would this happen?
Mhm.
What's the purpose in this, and what's this all about? Can you tell me, like, before we wrap up, if you could, what you see happening in our healthcare system? I've called it like the dismantling. I think our healthcare system is shifting in a huge way, and it's got to take a bit of a more of a dive before it can be reconstructed. But
Mhm.
what do you kind of see as what needs to change?
Yeah, that's a big
Yeah.
big issue. Um, yeah, I mean, I think I guess maybe coming back to something I said earlier in the interview about just like us as nurses having like setting more clear boundaries
Hmm.
about like like what we can do as individuals, and having a greater priority on work-life balance. I mean, I think that's where things have gone wrong for so many people. And yeah, I find it, it's interesting because we get so much time in our education as nurses about reflecting and self-care and things like that, but then we go into the world and it's really hard to practice. So yeah, I think if more of us were able to set those kind of like clear boundaries, there would be less burnout and there'd be more retention. Yeah, so I guess like I think the health authorities as our employers could do a better job in creating the space for that. Um, yeah, that I mean that's one small thing
Hmm.
I see that can make a difference. I mean, there's so much more that needs to happen than just that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's, when, especially when I started doing this work with nurses, I was like, often finding myself like, I can't do this. Like, this issue is way too big. Like, I would talk to the coach I was working with, and I'd be like, you don't understand what the system is like. You don't understand. Like, I can't make any change here. And I would just be like scrambling and panicking, and she would just like, whoa, just whoa, back up. Like,
Yeah.
think about each individual out there. And she says, you're out there with a squirt bottle, one person at a time, but after you're finished with them, they have their own squirt bottle, and they're out there psh, psh, spraying people. So I tell that story to my clients all the time, and I joke and say at the end of our program, I want to send them all a squirt bottle, because I actually do believe that we can impact change on a really huge level by us just focusing on ourselves and as an individual. Because when you set boundaries, when you prioritize yourself and your needs and your work-life balance, you start to, set that example for new nurses, for some of your
Mhm.
friends or colleagues,
Yeah.
people that you're working with, right? They see you doing that. They start to build from that. They ask you questions. It's like the ripple just spreads from there. So although our system is really broken and not working for anyone at this stage. I shouldn't say that, but it kind of feels like that most days. But
I think
um,
most of us feel that way. Yeah.
yeah, so there is a lot of change that needs to happen for sure. But I think if we want to feel like we have any sense of control, and we have any sense of empowerment in this, is to say, I'm in control of me, and so I'm going to make the changes that I need to make in order for me to be healthy, me to be whole, me to have that balance. And then, maybe it is a choice. Maybe it's a choice to leave. Maybe it's a choice to stay. I've seen and I've worked with nurses, in my program, that stay. But once they start doing the work on themselves, staying doesn't seem like such a life sentence. Like,
Mhm.
I just have to count away the days until I'm retiring, which is just such an awful place to be. I mean, how many
Yeah.
times do we hear that, right? All the
Yeah.
time, all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I really appreciate you for being here, for sharing your story. I want to just give you a chance. Is there anything else you would like to share with the listeners?
Yeah, I think I think it's a really ugly place we're in now in some ways. But I really truly believe that everything's going to work out. And um, I believe that there will be a lot of healing and good that comes out of this. I think we're going to learn. And I shared my story on social media recently. And I just had a huge influx of of support and love and compassion and understanding. And I think the more that we all share our stories, the more we create these opportunities for people, to learn and experience, what we've been through, and bring people on either side together. So yeah, I have a lot of hope for the future. And it's all going to work out, that I believe.
Yeah, it's I often say to my kids, faith and trust, and a little bit of pixie dust. Like sometimes it doesn't quite feel like enough, but um,
Yeah.
I think you're right. I truly believe everything happens for a reason. As maybe as cliche as that sounds, I that's what I believe, and I think that this is going to evolve. I think we have an opportunity here as individuals to learn and
Hmm.
to do better,
Yeah.
for each of us. And we've all played a role, no matter what page you've been on throughout all of this. And compassion is going to be a huge thing for us, and healing as a culture. And and just seeing each other in our own experience, in our shared experience, I should say. And recognizing that we're all doing the best that we can. We all see through a different lens. We all have a different truth, a different belief system, and that doesn't make anybody less than or greater than each other. That we're all just kind of figuring this out. But the more we can come together and share our experiences, just like you're saying, share our stories, and hold space for each other, just with this open curiosity and understanding and compassion, I think is it is going to be the ticket for us, and healing, to move forward for these generations to come that deserve a better, brighter future than what
Hmm.
we're currently in. And I just want to go back to that accountability piece, because although I believe our systems need to take accountability, in our employers and every level, that also includes us. And part of that is owning how you have contributed to the current climate of division and hate and separation. And no matter what you believe, you've contributed, in some ways, right? Like almost none of us have been completely perfect in how we've treated other people, and how we've
Yeah.
judged, and criticized, and considered
Yeah.
ourselves as separate. And the more of us that really take those honest looks at ourselves, and accountability for the role that we've played, it creates an opportunity, again, an opportunity to change
Yeah.
it, right? If you're not willing to
Yeah.
be honest about it, you can't change it. So
Yeah.
to just like put your ego aside and step up and own what role you've played, not just in this either. Like, we're talking, this has been going on for years and years and years, right? Generations. I don't know how long, but long time that we've had division in our world. So
As long
it's
as
just maybe
humanity's been around.
maybe, yeah. So
Yeah.
it's like, possibly this is a huge opportunity for us as a species
Hmm.
to change the trajectory of where we're going, because this is not healthy for anybody, right? Like, to live in this
Yeah.
kind of fear and instability and uncertainty kind of frame, like this graspy kind of way of living. It's just not healthy for anybody. So yeah, I this is such a needed conversation, and I'm so grateful for your courage to share it, and to sit with me, and dig in this way. So yeah, again, just a super huge thank you for being here, and allowing us to witness and hear your story.
Thanks, Sander. It's been a pleasure.
Mm, awesome. I personally want to thank you for taking your time to listen to this podcast. It is my truest honor to sit with these nurses and witness them tell parts of their story. We as human beings have a deep need to be seen and heard, and this is my way of helping nurses in particular find their voice. Please know that the opinions shared in this podcast are those of the individual sharing them and not a reflection of any employer or regulatory body. We are sharing our truth, and that may not always resonate with you, but I'm guessing if you're listening, that something has rung true for you in this podcast. Our stories offer healing and create connection, two things that we as nurses need as we navigate the jungle of a healthcare career. So thank you for being witness, and if you feel inclined to reach out to the guest on today's episode to offer validation and appreciation, you can always find their contact in the show notes as well as other links to the offerings of Sandra Pare Wellness. If you'd like to be a part of the community, join our private Facebook group, Surviving Nursing. And if you'd like to share your story on the End the Silence podcast, be sure to reach out. When we can come out of the shadows and into our light, we can create the change that is needed. And when we do this work together, we are so much stronger. Thank you for listening.